most expensive helicopter in the world, costs over $200 million. That is more than a Boeing airliner, more than 6 of the most expensive car ever commissioned. And here is the part I love: you cannot buy one. Not with any fortune on earth, only one customer has ever been allowed to own it. And just this week, the company that builds it agreed to pay $5 million for a slab of granite, as something very close to an apology. I'll explain that apology at the end, because it might be my favorite story in all of luxury aviation. Trust me, it's worth the wait. But first, I want to take you up the entire price ladder of the sky, floor by floor. From the helicopter you could order tomorrow, to the flying palace of presidents, to the machine so expensive and so powerful that the White House lawn literally could not survive it. Let's start on the showroom floor. A basic Airbus ACH160, a light single-engine helicopter, starts at around $3.3 million. Add the Aston Martin edition treatment, with hand-stitched leather and paintwork matched to the brand's sports cars, and you're wearing a designer label in the sky. But the true entry ticket to serious luxury is the Airbus ACH160. It starts at around $14 million, and with full customization, it climbs to roughly $20 million. This is the helicopter that flies like a business jet feels. A cabin wrapped in glass, seats trimmed by the same designers who build super yacht interiors, and blade tips curved like a boomerang, so the whole machine whispers instead of thumps. Buyers spec these cabins the way they spec a Bentley. Open-pore wood veneers, electrochromic windows that dim at the touch of a button, champagne chillers where a troop bench used to be. $20 million, and honestly, it's the cheapest thing I'm showing you today. Because now we climb to the flying palace. The Augusta Westland AW101 was built as a military machine. 3 engines, a cabin you can stand up in. But in VVIP trim, it becomes something else entirely. Around $25 million with first-class airline seating, a galley, a toilet, soundproofed panels, and if you like, an actual shower. 14 passengers in total luxury, or 30 if the entourage grows. 3 engines isn't a luxury flourish, by the way. It's the point. Lose one engine over a city or the open sea, and a VVIP AW101 simply keeps flying on the other 2. When your passenger list is presidents and royalty, redundancy is the ultimate amenity. The first country to fly one was Turkmenistan in 2013, a head-of-state machine for a nation rich in oil and gas. But the AW101's most famous story is the sale that collapsed. In 2009, India ordered 12 of them to carry its president and prime minister, a deal reported at over $500 million. Then investigators started asking how that deal was won. By 2013, India's own defense minister stood up and said the words no manufacturer ever wants to hear. Corruption has taken place, and bribes have been taken. The order was cancelled, and 2 of those palace-fitted helicopters, built for Indian leaders who never flew them, ended up carrying the president of Nigeria instead. A $25 million machine with a scandal in its logbook. And that, right there, tells you what these helicopters really are. Nobody bribes anybody over a machine. They do it over what the machine means. Whoever steps out of an AW101 has already told you who they are before they say a word. One rung higher sits a name you may not know, but a shape you have absolutely seen. The Sikorsky S-92. A new one costs around $27 million. And in executive trim, it has carried heads of state on nearly every continent. Sikorsky, by the way, has always been the helicopter house of the powerful. Donald Trump famously flew a Sikorsky S-76 with his name down the side. A helicopter reported to have had over $6 million of gold-trimmed interior work, lavished on a machine worth barely $1 million. That is the strange economics of luxury aviation. The paint and the leather can cost more than the aircraft. And if buying one is out of reach, you can rent the experience. Chartering an S-92 runs around $6,200 per hour. Think about that. A single afternoon's joyride costs more than most people's car. That's before the hangar, the crew, the maintenance. In this world, the purchase price is only the cover charge. But the S-92 matters for one reason above all the others. Because when the United States government went shopping for the most protected helicopter in human history, this was the airframe they chose. Hold that thought. First, we have to pass through the military floor because this is where the numbers stop being luxury and start being unbelievable. Meet the Sikorsky CH-53K King Stallion, the most expensive military helicopter ever built. 3 engines, each producing 7,500 shaft horsepower. It can lift 36,000 pounds on a hook, roughly its own empty weight, which means this is a helicopter that can pick up another helicopter its own size and fly away with it. It hauls armored vehicles, artillery, even downed aircraft, slung beneath its belly like luggage. The United States Marine Corps plans to buy 200 of them for around $25 billion. Recent contract pricing puts each one at roughly $100 million. And when development costs are folded in, estimates have run as high as $138 million per aircraft. Let me put that in perspective. A Gulfstream G700, the private jet of choice for billionaires, lists at around $78 million. This helicopter costs more than the jet. Israel has ordered it too, and yet the King Stallion is still not the answer to our title. Because the most expensive helicopter in the world doesn't carry cargo, and its story starts small. In July 1957, Dwight Eisenhower became the first sitting American president to fly in a helicopter. A tiny 2-seat Bell with a glass bubble for a cockpit, chosen so he could evacuate the White House in minutes if the Cold War ever turned hot. From that little bubble, an entire dynasty of presidential helicopters was born, each generation bigger, safer, more expensive. The Sea Kings, the White Hawks, the famous white-topped fleet the world now recognizes on sight. And in 2014, that dynasty came due for its most expensive air yet. It carries 1 passenger. It is called the VH-92A Patriot, and you know it by another name, Marine One. The US Navy selected Sikorsky to build the new presidential fleet on that S-92 airframe I told you about. 23 helicopters, a program costing around $5 billion. Do the arithmetic and each aircraft comes out at over $200 million, nearly 8 AW101 flying palaces per helicopter. What does that money buy? The details are classified, but the reporting points to hardened, secure communications that let the president command from the air, defensive systems, and survivability engineering most nations would envy. It flies with identical decoys in formation, a reported shell game in the sky, so no one watching from the ground knows which white-topped helicopter holds the president. Even the paint is a statement. The hand-finished white top has marked the presidential helicopter for generations, and it stays. The full fleet was delivered in August 2024, and that same month it flew a president for the very first time. The most expensive helicopter ever built, finally on duty. And that is where this story should end. But it doesn't, because the world's most expensive helicopter had one problem no one saw coming. It was too powerful for its own home. The VH-92A's exhaust vents sit toward the back of the aircraft, angled down, and every time it landed at the White House, all that heat poured straight onto the most famous lawn on Earth and scorched it. $200 million helicopter, burned grass. For a while, Marines would lay a sheet of metal on the south lawn as a landing target, but pilots sometimes missed the mark, and the grass got singed and ripped out anyway. The administration even considered keeping the old helicopters just for White House landings, and the old fleet is genuinely old. The VH-3D King entered presidential service in the late 1970s. Some of the machines protecting presidents today are older than the president's children. Picture the absurdity of it. The United States spent $5 billion building a helicopter that can survive threats most of us will never know about. And the thing it couldn't defeat was grass. Then this month, July 2026, came the fix, and I promise you the quote is real. The president told reporters, I said, has anyone ever thought of a helipad? I had like 6 generals in front of me, and they go, wow, that's a good idea. So the White House is getting its first permanent helipad, Granite, stamped with the White House seal, at a reported cost of around $5 million. And Sikorsky, the manufacturer, is paying for it. In the president's words, because they didn't tell us how powerful these helicopters were, and they felt a little bit guilty. Construction started in early July, with completion planned for September 17th, 1 week before the president of China arrives at the front door. So let's crown a winner, honestly. The most expensive helicopter money can actually buy. That's the S-92 and the AW101 Flying Palace in the $25 to $27 million range, the ceiling of civilian luxury. But the most expensive helicopter in the world, full stop, is the VH-92A Marine One at over $200 million per aircraft. A $5 billion fleet with a decoy shell game, communications that can run a superpower from the sky, and a Granite driveway its own builder is paying for out of embarrassment. For scale, the entire fleet cost about as much as 10 of Jeff Bezos's $500 million super yachts. And I've given you the full tour of one of those before. Here's what stays with me though. Every machine on today's ladder was built to make someone feel untouchable. But the most expensive one of all can't even touch the grass. So tell me in the comments, if the keys were yours, which one are you taking? The Aston Martin in the sky, the Flying Palace, or the white top with the decoys? If this tour was worth your time, a like helps more than you know. Subscribe for a new door into this world every single day, and I'll see you inside the next one.